One sentence I never wanted to hear anyone say to me was, "There's a calling on your life." Never. I just didn't want to hear it. Yeah, sure, it sounds harmless and it may even be beautiful to some people, but for me, it was terrifying. Like, if anyone said those words to me, I would internally shut down. Like, I would just shut down because something in me feels like, wait, so I have no say anymore in what my life looks like. Like, my autonomy has just been, stripped away, and I didn't even get to have a say in any of it. Right? That was what was happening in my head. It was more like it's either you accept the call or you spend the rest of your life in some kind of spiritual doom. And neither of those options felt great. Right. So what I did was I simply avoided it completely. Anywhere they would mention something like that, I was very reluctant going. Right. Yes, I was very careful about avoiding such situations where that kind of conversation would come up. Because I told myself this: God gave me a brain. I can think, I can create, I can build things. So whatever I put my mind to and actually excelled at, that was God's will for me. Simple, right? Like, if I'm being really honest with myself, it wasn't the idea of being called that scared me. It was the fear that what God wanted for me wouldn't match what I wanted for myself. You know that feeling where you're scared to even let a thought land because what if it turns out to be true? Yeah, that was me. I was terrified that if I sat with it long enough, I'd have to let go of everything I'd been building and trade it in for some long, painful, isolating path that ended with me standing behind the pulpit every Sunday. No, no, no disrespect to pastors. Absolute, respect for them, right? But for me, here's where it got a little bit, more complicated because I'm a Christian, and in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, it talks about Jesus saying that if anyone wants to follow him, then they must deny themselves and pick up their cross and follow him daily, right? So every time I push the thoughts of calling away, I'd feel this quiet guilt like, do I even actually believe this? Is my faith really, is my faith real if I keep running from this? That insecurity just gave me more reason to avoid the whole thing, right? And then somewhere between September and November last year, I think that was when something changed. I decided to just be more intentional with reading the Bible. Nothing dramatic, just 30 minutes a day, except Sundays because I went to church on Sunday, so that would cover that one, right? I dozed off many times, a lot actually, right? More times than I'd like to admit, but I would wake up every time and then keep going. My goal wasn't to figure out God's plan for my life. I wasn't reading with an agenda. I just wanted to know Him better. That was it. And looking back, I think that sincerity is what changed everything. Because when I stopped reading with a preconceived answer that I was ready to defend, I started actually understanding things differently. And that flipped everything I thought I knew. Because what if, calling isn't reserved for pastors and prophets? What if it's actually the life of every single Christian? What if we are all called not to a job title or a career or some particular version of success, but to become more like Jesus? To imitate him, to be ambassadors for something bigger than ourselves. That's not about what you do, it's about who you are, how you treat people, how you respond when things get hard, what you build and why you build it. And I think that's what a life laid down actually looks like. As a matter of fact, something I've been thinking about a lot is the difference between assignments and calling. I think we tend to confuse assignments with calling. Right? Take Moses, for example. He was given an assignment to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. That's the task. But his calling was to become the kind of person who could do that. The person patient enough to spend 40 years in the wilderness before the burning bush. The person humble enough to argue with God and still show up. The person surrendered enough to lead people who resented him toward a land he would never enter himself. Can you imagine? Right? That is calling. Not what he was sent to do, but who he had to become in order to be able to do it. And honestly, that looked a lot like Jesus to me. Our assignments are what we end up doing. They are largely shaped by our choices, our environments, the opportunities that find us. But calling is what shapes us. It's that continuous quiet work of becoming. So I'm not scared anymore, right? I'm not scared that God's will for me won't line up with my own, because my will, the deeper version of it, if I'm being honest, is to become like Jesus. And Jesus willed that God's will be done. So now my biggest question isn't what am I supposed to do with my life, but rather, am I living up to what I've already said yes to, which is Jesus? And when I fall short, I know God is merciful enough to bring my attention back to it. That's that. I do have another question for you today, and that is, what scares you more, right? Knowing your purpose or thinking you already know it? Which of those two scares you more? I look forward to any comments you may have. If you like this episode, share it with someone you think might enjoy it. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in another one.